as Alicia said, you're probably all tired, and so I need to move along with this. But before I start, I just want to thank the individual who made the statement that this all looks like it's very general management or general leadership and not project one. I have my own version of what is a project leader versus a project manager, and clearly I believe a project leader is somebody who knows an awful lot about project management and then is put into a leadership role. So, and that he moves from being a person he or she is meant to manage a project to one who enables a project to be managed. But as I go along here, I'm going to talk to you about just why we need these project directors or project leaders. And clearly the challenge that's faced on some of these large projects demands that we have individuals who lead these who've got the capacity to deal with all the softer side of what have I done? The softer side of leadership, and that is where they have to essentially be mini CEOs. And look, I'm going to take you through a journey of my experiences, and you can perhaps reflect upon it. But understand, I'm now looking at this with the wisdom of age and the wisdom of experience, and so I'm looking back at perhaps some of the more significant, more interesting, more challenging projects with the lens that I now have as a leader. So clearly, stakeholder management was never the theme of an interest for a project manager way back when. He just got given the job and he got on and did the job. Now, stakeholder management can dominate the role of the leader. Without successful negotiation and alignment of stakeholders, you won't have a project. Corporate communications, this is a very interesting one. Large corporations generally have different agendas, and to be able to communicate through that and find the right way to get the executives in that organisation to respond and work with you on the project can be very challenging. And the sophistication of corporate communications is a critical part. Governance and leadership. Governance is now, you heard it yesterday in some of the other talks, it's becoming quite critical and it's becoming quite sophisticated. Before, governance used to be somebody was a sponsor, used to look over your shoulder, used to decide whether you're doing right or wrong. Realistically, he probably had a good idea. Nowadays, governance is becoming absolutely critical. On some of the mega projects, you will have boards of those corporations who don't know what they don't know. And that's when governance takes an extra level of importance. And as I say, leadership is key. So, what I want to do is indulge myself by taking you around a bit of a journey of my experiences. And I want to take you through 5 projects that I've worked upon, and I'm going to stay close to this so I can see it and I don't move away from the loudspeaker. I'll start off with Bougainville, and BCL stands for Bougainville Copper Limited. I'll go to Chilean Gold in the island of Borneo. I'll go to Freeport in West Papua, and I'll trip across to Madagascar, and I'm going to burst a little dream for you if you think Madagascar is like a movie, and then I'll end off in Olympic Dam. So Bougainville is is an island on the northernmost island of the Solomon Islands. It used to be British Solomon Islands, now Solomon Islands, but it's actually part of Papua New Guinea. In the 70s, they had the world's largest copper mine there, and I was involved in a project that was to take tailings from the mine site, which is at 1,200 metres elevation, down to the coastal plain. A very technically innovative project. It at that stage was the largest tailings pipeline in the world. It was moving roughly 100 million tonnes of slowly down the mountain, and there were some innovative things we did to make it all happen. So a terrific project for a young project manager to learn on, to get great experience, and the difficulties. You just see that winding road there. That was our port to mine access road. But that's what the mine looked like. at its maturity, perhaps, I could argue, in the Empress Augusta mountain range. And this sad picture was, it all came to an untimely end when in 1989, the local people, the indigenous people, rose up. They blew up one of the high voltage power lines, brought it down, stopped the mine, and paralysed not only the island of Bougainville, but the country of Papua New Guinea. At that stage, Bougainville Copper was providing 40% of Papua New Guinea's GDP. So, what were the learnings? If I look at it through a lens of a leadership learning, there were a number of things. The benefit of a long-term relationship with the client. Here clearly was an organisation that had a tremendous challenge of working in a country. I need to remind people, 40 years prior to that, a large part of Papua New Guinea, they were cannibals. It came a long way to be one of the largest copper mines in the world. So there was a relationship with a client that was very sophisticated. We knew what they were doing. In fact, we were embedded into the organisation, so we were clearly able to understand what they needed and grow with them as they grew and as their government grew. The value of front-end loading in projects like this, you better make sure you've got everything planned before you ship out and go to the island, or else you're going to have problems. And then, and obviously, the various team structures you have to have, and they vary with projects. In this case, we sought, the only way we're going to do it is to go out doing it ourselves. So we, instead of, everybody's heard of EPCM, this was an EPC where we really did it ourselves. We used an organisation, Bechtel, most people know that organisation is, and we were very successful in actually implementing it. Successful in that we finished it, we were 95% finished when all this broke apart. And so what's the leadership lesson here? The leadership lesson was that went really almost beyond the leadership role, was the awareness and the inherent and emerging sovereign risk. We talk about sovereign risk, and you can talk perhaps in the comfort of a country like Dubai, that there is no sovereign risk, but there are many places where projects are prosecuted around the world where there's tremendous sovereign risk. And not being aware of that, not being able to control that, we essentially, as a company, we lost our license to operate the world's largest copper mine. So that was a good lesson for me to take onto my journeys, and I had this little fetish about Ireland, so I then tripped off to Borneo. Most people who know of Borneo is split up into 3 countries, but the largest part, the bit in green there, is the province of Kalimantan in Indonesia. Kalimantan was an amazing place to go to. Borneo was an amazing place to go to. But I arrived at the same time that the Indonesian government had decided to, on a transmigration program, to move the overcrowded Javanese people into Borneo. And the other 2 pictures that you see out in the map there are meant to describe what we're challenged with. Obviously, impenetrable jungle. Our only means of transport in and out of the port was an 1.5-hour helicopter flight. Unfortunately, moving all these people over to the islands, over to this island, they chose to adopt a slash and burn approach, and they cut down a fair bit of that jungle. So there were days where we were actually, the visibility was so low that, to give you an idea, Singapore was 2,000 kilometres away. It's got 70-storey buildings, and you could fly into Singapore and you couldn't see the skyline of Singapore in that. So clearly, we couldn't go up by helicopter, so we had to go up that little, what looks like a nice little meandering river. It's a river that's at some points almost 1 kilometre wide. It's the Great Mahakam River. It runs at about 7 knots downstream, and of course we're going upstream, so to go to the site was about a 20-hour journey to get up to the site. And we had to move the entire gear all up the site. Again, a couple of the lessons we learned here. Hopefully, I was working for the same organisation, by the way, that was Rio Tinto, that had come from Bougainville, and hopefully they'd learned some lessons there. But the key lessons we learned there was you really need to be innovative about the way you're actually going to do this. And there were many structured, innovative solutions that we came up with. One clearly was that we needed to get everything ready and put it in some way where logically we can consolidate all our material and plant and then move it in a controlled way to the site, which we did there with Singapore, and then we barged around the 2,000 kilometres up the river to the site. Effective environments, you need to ensure you make the environment way in the right way for people to operate. If you don't, you run the risk that people on such difficult projects will just disappear. And we spent a lot of time building a very strong leadership group and team. But perhaps the most important one, what I stress on team, is getting the A team. Now, if you talk to every project manager, project leader, they say they'd like the A team. And not everybody can have the A team, but this was a project that it was a critical factor. We went out and searched and got the A team. In fact, we started the project late, 6 months later, just to ensure that we got the A team onto this project. And all projects, there are good lessons and there are bad lessons. Decision bias. This was a case where the executives in the organisation wanted this project for half the cost and to be done twice as quick. Well, we were a little bit late, and it cost not half the cost, it cost a fair bit more. What I am satisfied about this project and the experience was it ran very successfully. Here was one of the larger gold projects in the world, and it ran very successfully until it stopped in 2005 when the ore body was exhausted. So again, as I'm trying to theme with you, I'm picking up these leadership lessons. These are not project management lessons. These goes outside the remit of the manager. So now I went to Freeport in West Papua. It used to be called Irinyjaya. It's now back being called West Papua. The little satellite picture you see there is a picture of the open pit, and you probably can't read it there, but some of the other things it's drawing your attention to is a glacier up there. So the challenge we faced with this particular project was there were very many technical challenges, but there also were some great commercial and leadership challenges. To give you another pick of what the harshness of the environment. So the concentrator and mine was at 4,000 metres. We're 4 degrees south of the equator there, but it used to snow. The average temperature was between 0 and 10 degrees at the mine site. We used to have to use alpine diesel to run. Down at the bottom where we parked out the concentrate, it was 36 degrees. It was tremendously humid. And in between, we used to average between 8 to 12 metres of rain a year. We built the concentrator, one of the largest concentrators at that stage in the world was built, plus a 120 kilometre high voltage power line, of which about 5 or 6 of the major power lines had to be put in by helicopter, and then all the necessary infrastructure. The operation there has 17,000 employees, so it's a very mature operation, but we were doing a major expansion, essentially doubling up. All of that was done in record time, so there were some great lessons that were learned there, and some sultry ones about convincing organisations, again executives, and indeed the client, when sometimes their best advice is not good advice at all. So the critical thinking when we were designing this project, one of the most critical things we decided was the project was too big. And we chose to take a stance and divide it into 3. You always run the risk when you split a project up into 3 that you'll have interface problems, integration problems, but we believed it was very necessary. And the division actually worked out quite easily. We divided into the concentrator and the mine, which Bechtel did, to the power station, which Duke Daniel did from the US, and then we had ourselves again do all the infrastructure. So we took it upon ourselves as an organisation to link it all together, and that, I believe, was a great bit of critical thinking that happened in the design phase. Value of harnessing dispersed or virtual teams. This is where we came a bit unstuck. the owners of this mine is the Freeport organization. They're based in New Orleans, and they decided in their wisdom that the entire project engineering team should move from San Francisco, where the Bechtel offices were, to New Orleans and work there. That resulted us in getting the C team. The A team certainly were not going to move, and they could go to any other job they wanted to within the Bay Area. And the B team were perhaps less inclined. They went there, but soon enough that they moved back, and we lost a lot of capability and lost a lot of time, which we then had to make up. So, and clearly, as I said to you about splitting it up, it's critical that you actually understand where the value is, and I'll talk a bit later about the value. The value is probably the most important thing, but we saw that the only way we could actually do this was split it up and drive it from 3 different projects. So now I'm going to Madagascar, and so here I'm going to burst everybody's bubble if they think that Madagascar is what the cartoon movie is. Let me explain what Madagascar is. It's 2,000 kilometres long, it's 500 kilometres wide, it's the 4th largest island in the world. It's probably the poorest country in the world. The average male lives to 45, the females to 52. It's got endemic malaria, it's got the highest infant mortality in the world. The capital is Antananarivo, and we were working in the southeast there, a distance of 520 kilometres. If you went by road from the capital down to the corner there, the southeast corner, it could take you, if you went pretty quickly, you could do it in 6 days. So you clearly were not going to go by road. Again, we had to apply a lot of innovative thinking, a lot of leadership amongst the executives to make sure that happened. But here's the key challenge we had. The people were impoverished. They were extremely poor. Average income was $200 a year. Very undernourished. We were looking to, we had made some grand positioning about using about 20 to 30% of their workforce. That was going to be a challenge, even having them fit enough to do the work. But one of the riskiest things we faced on this particular project, and this is again out of the box for leadership. If you know where Madagascar is, it's off the east coast of southern Africa. While it's gone, let's come back. That's just a side of the pictures of what we built. But Madagascar is fortunate, even though it's got very high STD, it's got very low incidence of HIV/AIDS. Our entire workforce, we could see, was going to have to come from Africa. That was the nearest port, and the challenge with that was we were likely to be blamed, in fact cause an influx of AIDS into that country. So here was the challenge: how could we convince the Madagascan government, the United Nations, the World Bank, who had some co-funding, that we needed to prohibit anybody who was HIV positive coming into that country? Well, the United Nations said you can't do that. In fact, Rio Tinto said you can't do that, and the World Bank said we won't fund you if that's what you do. So, and the reason why they said is you cannot stop somebody working anywhere. That's a stance that the human welfare that people in the health organisation have taken, that they should be allowed to come. My first job as the project leader on that was to do a baseline survey of the whole of Madagascar about the incidence of HIV and AIDS in that country, to be able to demonstrate what we were working against. And having secured that it was a very low level, we did some other research with some of the London Tropical Disease Institute, where we were able to link that, well, as you all know about the terrible disease of HIV and AIDS, if you get AIDS, you don't die from AIDS, you die from complications because of AIDS. Your immune system is run down, and that's why you die. You could die from a common cold. Unlikely that you could get seriously ill. But the combination of malaria and AIDS is death. There is no, I could get out of this. You're going to die. So that was the one way we were able to convince the organisation why we were able to do this. Now, why was I against it? Why didn't people not want to do this? Because as it turns out, there were vested interests within the really unsophisticated government of Madagascar that saw any hold on or any stop of people coming into this country unencumbered, in other words, whether they have got that illness or not, could hurt their tourist industry. And it was a fledgling tourist industry. And here we're talking about opening up a mine that was 10% of the world's known high-grade titanium dioxide. Clearly lessons we have to learn. It's just the port we built there. So the leadership lesson we learned here is, again, innovative solutions. This is a constant theme, but these innovative solutions were not going to come from a project manager. They were coming from a leader engaging with the government, engaging with the governments all over the world, engaging with organisations like United Nations, World Bank, etc. The political environment, it's sad when you come into a country who desperately need this, desperately want this, but don't know what they don't know. And they tend to engage with, use NGOs to support them. And NGOs, while they have their place in project land, they also can be very disruptive and take people along a journey, particularly unsophisticated politicians along the journey you don't want them to be. And to try and unwind that and bring it back to sense was a long journey. Give you an idea, from the start when we found this project, when we found this asset to the time we developed it, was 20 years and 6 months. So now I'm coming to the big island, the island of Australia. Olympic Dam is called Olympic Dam because there was a small dam that a farmer built on the site back in 1956, in the same year as the Olympic Games were held in Melbourne. We kept the name, sounds pretty good, and Olympic Dam is the largest deposit, contiguous deposit of all in the world. It's got the entire periodic table down there, but just to give you an idea, BHP, as the world's largest mining company, they threshold of what they call a very large resource. There's 50 million tonnes of ore. Olympic Dam has got 9 billion tonnes of ore. It's going to take, to build this, will take approximately 10 years, spending on an average between 6 to 10 billion a year every year. The secret to this mine is very simple. It's a great ore body, but it's 300 metres underground, and there's nothing between it and that ore body. It's benign. So you've got to actually, the best way of mining this is to dig a big hole, and the little outline you see there is digging a big hole. And that's what they're going to do, and it's going to take an enormous amount to actually do it, an enormous amount of money. So currently, that was the project that I ended up and hopefully applied all the lessons that I had to learn about how you actually do these projects and how you do it well and how you lead them. Although it has stopped as they reconsider the way for it to go forward, one of the biggest challenges I had is structuring a project organisation for this multi-stages over 20 years, which each stage over 10 billion. Establishing the owner's line capability. This was one that the owner is going to have to take a big part in as when it spans so many years. We're going to exhaust most of the EPCM capacity in Australia and certainly draw many resources internationally for it. Our functional excellence capability had to be the best. We really went out and at the peak of the project in the planning stage, my owners team, I had 500 people in my owners team. And we had to engage with Tier 1 EPCM contractors for the long term. Bearing in mind, we're trying to convince them to absorb a fair bit of risk along this journey. So it was quite a challenge, and we had to be very innovative in our contractual forms that we're going to take them along this journey. And it's all about value. How can we actually do something and ensure we're going to get the value? So let me just sum up by stressing that you should only do a project if it delivers value, for no other reason. And when I talk about value to an organisation may be the bottom line in terms of the return on the asset, the revenue stream they're going to get it against the costs. But value to a government might be in community welfare, in the extension of the nation, etc. There are many versions of value, and you shouldn't be skewed by thinking, well, there is no value to this. It might be huge value, and you only have to look at a country like Dubai and the Emirates to understand the massive amount of value that's been put on here. Yes, you could quantify it in cost, but in value it goes far beyond the quantifying of what you'd actually get from the assets and the infrastructure you put down. Effective project teams is one of the most critical things to get, and Alicia spoke earlier on about having that. It is a people business, and one of the most exciting things I always like about it, because it is a people business, and you have to have effective project teams. And you actually have to be enabled to build those teams and be prepared to pull them down. Generally, on a project cycle, you build and rebuild an organisation about 3 times, through your planning stage, through your execution stage, and then you wrap up to operation. You build 3 organisations. So you have to have the ability to, as a leader, be prepared to pull down and rebuild, and do it with empathy, with understanding. Don't be afraid to do it, though. That's the bottom line. Do not be afraid to do it. Stakeholders. If I look at, say, Olympic Dam, and just to sum up the amount of stakeholders we had there, our engagement with the stakeholders, who were very worried about the environmental impact, they were very worried that we were actually unearthing 35% of the world's known uranium and going to be exporting it overseas, and Australia wasn't into nuclear, so how can these things all work together? We undertook the largest EIS in the history of Australia. It was a 7-year, $120 million EIS on its own. But our engagement went across 2 state governments, 1 federal government, and anybody else who was interested, including the World Anti-Nuclear Proliferation Movement, the United Nations, etc., etc. A massive undertaking. I had to have a team of people working on that. When you're trying to do a big project, and you're trying to do essentially more with less, there's 2 things you have to do. You need technical innovation, and you need commercial innovation. And you better have a good leader on the top to actually make it all happen, or else you're never going to get the balance right to actually prosecute those. But clearly trying to do the same old again was not going to happen. I'm talking about a mining industry, by the way, that 100 years ago we had we used to mine with a truck, a shovel and a wheelbarrow, and now we have a mechanised truck, mechanised wheelbarrow and a mechanised shovel. So we haven't gone a long way. I've just been signalled to end off here, and sorry, I get pretty passionate about this stuff, so I'll just end off by saying, well, we know that how we have to turn stakeholder alignment into project strategy and plans, and we need to make sure that we've got these early intervention signals to preserve project value. If there's one thing I can leave you with, please remember it is all about value. Thank you very much.